Everybody says people are chasing validation, but here's the problem. Nobody actually explains what that means. Because if validation is supposed to mean confirming something meets an acceptable standard, why does it feel like people are constantly asking for validation without ever raising the standard? And more importantly, how does that actually work? Look what's happening right now across the internet. You got entire trends built around people introducing themselves in 10 seconds, laying out their personality, using viral sounds and effects, and just to really capture somebody's attention. And you also got this wave of nostalgia happening currently as well too, where people are recreating older internet trends from various areas across the internet. Same filters, same music, same energy. You've also got brands acting like influencers, right? And they're leaning more into leveraging memes, and chaos, and humor, right? Because that's actually what's getting attention now. You've even got trends that don't even last the full week. Just little spikes of attention that people react to and they just, laugh, chuckle about, and move on with their merry lives. So, you got this real question that we have to ask. Are people lowering their standards? Or are they adapting to systems that never really required standards in the first place? What's good, everybody? Court here. And we're checking in with you guys from the underground. This is the platform, again, where we talk about what's happening across the country, across the world, and we don't just stay surface level. We actually like to look under the hood on things here. And today's conversation is one we've been having online now for years, and that's what we're talking about today. And that's this. People say things like, everybody just wants validation, or stop seeking validation, or you should validate yourself. So today's conversation is on the topic of validation. And with all things, we want to start with the framing because, as I just mentioned, I don't think that's the proper framing that we should really focus onto and key in on before we really dive into this conversation. So, the real issue, from my perspective, and for the topic of today's video for discussion for you guys, is the issue isn't people wanting validation, actually. The real issue is people are just optimizing for systems that don't really require us to bring our best, right? They bring forth what gets them accepted or validated. And if the system doesn't require them to be excellent or to produce excellence, most people won't risk showing up with excellence or conducting themselves with that type of mindset, right? So, again, start with the definition. Validation means confirming something meets a standard. But that only works if everyone agrees on what that standard is. And today, we don't agree. So, validation has shifted from what it used to be, which is this thing, does this work? Is it good? To now, I wonder, will this get me recognized? Validation isn't about being right anymore. It's honestly nowadays about being recognized. And those two things are very, very, very completely different systems. So let's try to prove that really quickly. Let's take two creators, kind of sticking to like the social media world, right? One could spend 10 hours making something detailed and beautiful and all that. And another person can post a 20-second relatable clip, and we can guess which one of those two gets more engagement, right? Exactly. right? Point proven. So now we're not validating quality, we're really just validating response, reaction. The fastest content wins, oftentimes. So that doesn't necessarily leave space for the best content to win. And once you understand that, everything online starts to make sense and you start to look at things with a different perspective. And now we actually aren't sticking to surface level, we're looking up under the hood. Invalidation comes from a couple of different things, right? Institutions, expertise, measurable outputs, desired results. And nowadays, we're perceiving validation as just more engagement or the most visibility or who's going to give the best reaction. And again, in that kind of space, if people are capable of more, what's stopping them from just bringing it, right? But it's because of the system they're in. It doesn't really optimize for that. It doesn't really require for them to bring their best. It just requires for them to keep the attention of the audience. And so, high quality work, it takes time. There's, delayed feedback. And low effort work really isn't like that. There is immediate validation, and immediate response and reaction as well too. And there's also a risk that comes with high levels of production and whatnot. When you present your best, you open yourself up for true and real judgment and criticism. And not many people actually really respond well to criticism, and really any criticism that is of any depth, right? And significance. So people play it safe, right? And then there's identity, right? Presenting your best is saying, this is really who I am. So if it fails, it hits you deeper because you feel like you actually gave yourself. So if it doesn't turn out right, you feel like something is wrong with you. So, because of these things, people tend to kind of stay in that middle ground, right? Not too hot, not too cold. Good enough to be accepted, but not fully enough to really be defined. Most people really aren't avoiding excellence, they're really truly avoiding exposure. Now, let's zoom out for a second here. This whole thing is engineered. We live in an attention economy. Platforms are designed to capture your attention, retain your attention, and then eventually find a way to monetize that attention. So, what tends to spread, and we can see that, objectively across the internet, is emotion. It's relatability, it's controversy, even, not necessarily depth. So, people adapt, they stop asking, what's the best thing I can make? And they start asking, what will get me noticed? What will get me the most attention? And this is where things get a little bit uncomfortable in this conversation because this isn't just about content, right? And what we see on the internet as it pertains to content specifically and solely. This also shows up in real world conversations as well too, that just happen to be scaled and more exposed and have more attention on the internet. So let's look at some of the debates that are happening right now online around, a very touchy situation with the recent passing of the content creator by the name of Ashley Jeanette. Everybody knows about the story. I'm not going to recap that. She passed away. Um, so again, before I say anything further, again, offering condolences to the family for that loss. And uh, what I'm about to say isn't directed at her or the situation, but it's more so talking. about the discussion happening online around the scenario or because of it, right? And the discussion is this: should black men protect black women? What does protection even look like? And also, who deserves protection? And again, I'm not, trying to dive into that whole scenario or give my take or my opinion and things of that nature, but I just want to focus on that particular thing and relate that to the conversation of validation. So, as I proceed, if you really pay close attention to the conversations that we're witnessing across the internet on this topic, a lot of the conversations really, if you peel back the onions, the layers of that onion, and look under the surface, it's really not about protection. It's more so about validation, validation of behavior, validation of identity, and validation of one's choices. And you'll see people make decisions like, who they choose to be with, who they choose to, maybe do business with, who they choose to have a relationship with, things of that nature. And instead of asking, is this the right thing to do based on the scenario, based on intended outcomes, based on things of that nature that are kind of more logic based, it's around more so thoughts of like, who's going to support this? And if I need somebody else to, who's going to help me defend my actions? And when you think about it like that, it leads to an uncomfortable truth. And it's this: sometimes people aren't looking for validation of what's right. And again, I'm not saying that the scenario with Ashley Janae and that whole, the subject of interracial dating is a right or wrong thing. Not getting into that conversation. But what I am saying is this: they're looking for the validation of what they've already decided to do. That's, I think, the key thing that we should focus on today, more so as it pertains to this little segment right here. And even if it goes against their logic, even if it goes against, more positive or favorable outcomes, they still want that validation to do what they want to do, even if there may be some, I don't know if we should do that kind of qualities in it. Because once enough people agree with you, you don't have to change, even if you know you need to. Validation has now been used as a filter, as a defense mechanism, as armored, right? It's a shield now. If enough people agree with you, you don't have to change. You don't have to improve. You don't maybe have to acknowledge the other perspective oftentimes. So let me try to simplify this for you. Two people make the same bad decision. One gets criticized for it, the other gets defended. Why would that happen? Because of the audience. So now we're not really judging behavior, we're judging alignment, and we're basing that off of preference, not standards. And if your validation depends on the audience that you're in or you're aligned with at that particular time, your standards will change based on whatever room you're in, not based on your need or the outcomes that you're hoping to aspire to. And if your standards change depending on who's watching you, again, those aren't standards, that's negotiations. The standards really didn't disappear, though. They just got a little bit of fragmentation. Different systems reward different things, right? So what looks subpar in one system might be valid in another, but not all systems are built equally. Some require more proof than others, and others require more attention. and you're not watching standards collapse, right? As it pertains to this conversation, looking at it more broadly, right? From a social perspective, you're watching standards really more so compete with others. And relating this to us nerds, right? Nerd based systems, or people that kind of think more logically, right? They require measurable results. They oftentimes, because results need to be more measured, that tends to lead to delayed gratification, delayed validation sometimes, because they require more proof. And that's it. Um, Code works or it doesn't work, right? Products succeed or they don't. And in the kind of nerd mindset, the kind of nerd framework, and understanding how we kind of move and look at the world, there's not really any shortcuts when it comes to things like this. So nerds don't really try to escape validation. They just choose systems where sometimes validation might require more upfront, but the payoff on the back end tends to be greater. Nerds again don't avoid validation. They again just choose those systems that require more proof. So now people aren't just asking for subpar things to be validated. No, I don't think that's really what people are asking for. Well, that's really what's happening. I think more so what's happening is they're responding to the system requirements, right? And the system that most people are in, or systems that most people are in nowadays, don't really require much of anything. Really, just show up, sign your name, and you get a 100. And if a system requires you at a 6, right, on the scale of 1 to 10, most people won't risk showing up as a 9. So again, I don't think validation disappeared. What I think and what I'm trying to say and communicate to you guys, and hopefully you guys agree, and let's have a conversation about that in the comment section. But I think our standards are collapsing. I think, and not necessarily maybe collapsing, but they're more fragmented. So it's a different standard over here. It's a different standard over there. It's a different standard over there. And none of these systems are communicating with each other to establish a baseline level of efficiency and standardization across the board. And again, once you understand that, you can see that, you can witness that and identify that, you really stop asking the question, why are people like this? And you start asking the question, what system is this person optimized for? And once you can find an answer to that question about that person or that place that you might find yourself, that system, whatever, it begins to tell you everything you need to know. So if you liked what you heard today, if you resonated with what you heard today, or didn't, let's have a conversation about that in the comment section. But until next time, this is Court from Ghost Town Underground. We're going back underground. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.